Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Digital Woodcarver. My name is Laney Shaughnessy. I'll be your host this evening, and Burl Tishner is from Digital Woodcarver. He's the owner of Digital Woodcarver. He's co-hosting tonight. How are you doing this evening, Burl?
We're doing okay. It's been running a little bit behind here, and believe it or not, I dropped the ball and was supposed to do a little session with Woodcraft here local. So it's one of those evenings that I forgot about a training session, and but we're doing great when it comes to that. I like your back screen, and the only thing is your Digital Woodcarver letters in your hat is you can see the background coming through them because of your green screen. So
they're invisible. So yeah, that green screen takes everything green. That's why I had to wear my tan digital, even though my logo here is disappeared.
Yeah,
But no, it looks good. Now, were you? I'm sure that things were able to work out with the Woodcraft show.
It is. We'll reschedule. We'll do some extra stuff with them. It's just one of those things that the teacher or the guys up there and I didn't communicate, or we didn't, and I dropped the ball on that. But we have got a excellent topic tonight. We don't need to talk about that. We'll talk about router bits.
And go ahead. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say that a lot of times when we go to shows, one of the things that people come up to us, and you can contest to this, that, what bit do I need to use? Is it a V bit, a straight bit, a ball nose bit, thinking that there is a lot of different bits. So what I thought we would do is come up with a session. Maybe we can explain some of that and put people's mind to ease that, it's really the software, and as you do your projects, that will become very obvious of what bits that you will use or won't use. But there is a little bit of variation in those bits, and that's some of the things that we'll go through tonight and hopefully ease some minds there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to welcome everyone that joined us, that's joining us live tonight. People are still popping in. We've got a nice big crowd. Thank you all for coming and spending Wednesday night with Burl and I. And for those of you that are new to Digital Woodcarver, or just learning about us and things, as Burl mentioned earlier, we were talking about Woodcraft. Woodcraft is one of our vendors. We have 3 Woodcraft stores that provide sales of our units and everything to the public. That's Woodcraft in Appleton, Woodcraft in St. Louis, and I always forget the third Woodcraft, bro. What's my third Woodcraft?
My hometown,
Indianapolis, right? Yeah.
That's where it started, because obviously that's where I'm based out of, is Indiana. We're on the south west side of the city here, and the local one. When it comes,
I don't know why I always get 2 out of the 3, but I want to thank everybody for joining us. And like Burl said, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about router bits. The question that Burl gets is like, what tool do I use? The question I always get is, does the software tell you what tool you're supposed to use? What router bit you're supposed to use and things, which, in earlier versions, no, it doesn't tell you. But in the new version 10, Burl, that came out of the Vectric software, now when you're in a toolpath, if that tool is not associated with a common tool for the toolpath, it will not show it in the tool database. So that kind of helps narrow things down and all. But what Burl and I are going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to talk about different toolpaths and the different tools and things that you would most commonly use. But first of all, Burl, let's talk about some router bits in general.
Go ahead. And what we did, what I've got is around my desk here is I've got quite a variety of those. So we're going to kind of show our different bits. We don't carry every bit that's available to use. We're going to kind of go over, let's just say, what you would use at 90% of the time. And let's go through the 3 style of bits. And then I know, Laney, later on, you're going to pull up some software and kind of give some demonstrations of that. So hopefully everybody can see our bits when I show them. Some of them are still have the wax on them, so they might be a little hard to see, but we can explain them. One of the, and I grabbed 3 of them here.
I've got some bits as well, Burl.
Okay.
So we can kind of give them a wide variety of different things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on full screen so they can see what you're talking about here.
Okay.
So
Well,
it's nice and close up.
Yeah, we're going to start off with the, the software VCarve Desktop, VCarve Pro, and Aspire. The VCarve process, I just absolutely love it. It's an easy, very intuitive way of taking images and letters and stuff like that and making them look just like the way they are in artwork. So we're going to talk about the V-Bit to start with. If you've ever purchased or do purchase a digital wood carver, you'll get one of these bits. This is a little 1541 white side. By the way, all the bits that we sell are solid carbide. So if you ask or are curious about that, they're all solid carbide. Some of them will have a spade. I'll show those here in just a second. But this is a 1541, a 60 degree. It is a 3-flute router bit. I love this little bit. It is a small one. So you can't cut as deep. I mean, meaning that you can cut deep. The software will figure that out. But per pass, it is a little bit limited on how deep you can cut. So that's the V 60 degree. And then I'm going to show one that's just very similar to it.
And for those of you, Burl, that was the white side 1541 60 degree V-bit, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to show the 90 degree. It's just a little bit different style of a bit. But this is the V-bit, and this is what we do in the V carving. Now, it still has wax on it a little bit there, but you can see it kind of is a 2-flute. So it has a kind of a spade going across and then a body that holds that. And the difference is the angle. So if I can get this straight there, it's the angle that it comes up and here. So that's a 90 degree. One of the things, and we're going to show you some bits that are very sharp here later on. We got some bits that are pointier, and the reason that you would want to go with those pointier ones, or in this case, it's a blunt or not as sharp of point, is we'll show those later on why you would want to choose one or the other. But the V bits.
And while we're talking about V-bits, in the software, sometimes, depending on the cutter and all, you're going to see the terms included angle or half angle. The bits that Burl just showed you is a 90 degree included angle. Means it's overall 90 degrees. And the 60 degree, that white side 1541, is also a 60 degree included angle. Now, the bit that I'm holding up here, this happens to be a... looks like a V-bit, right? But it's considered in the software an engraving bit. This is a 20 degree engraving bit. And the only difference between a V-bit and an engraving bit is it's got a flat tip on it. It doesn't come straight to a point, and they start point and everything. So in the software asks for the half angle. So it would be an 11 degree half angle versus a 90 degree. So not to get too confusing, but I just want to kind of share that. There you go. That's a 30 degree.
Right. This is the pointier one we sell in a kit that gets down in for those little bitty letters or images that have some very detail. But I want to show that. That's a 30 degree.
Now, bro, keep that held up for a second. I want to show this is a 30 degree with a 1/2 head. Burl has a 30 degree with a 1/4 head. So there's different, even though the angles are the same, the diameters will vary based on the head difference. So it looks much different than what Burl's holding, but they're both 30 degree angle bit. So.
Right. And give you the same results. And as I was saying earlier, it just, some of them will allow you to take a little more off per pass because the cutting height of it is a little bit taller.
Exactly.
So that's your V-bits. Now there is... I have a 120. I didn't bring it in. It's out in the shop. But for making really big... Oh, you got it. Very nice.
I'm with you. I've got
got all those.
So this is a 120 degree 1.25" diameter, 120 degree V-bit.
Yep.
Here.
And there's a lot of difference.
Absolutely. And when it comes to a V-Carve toolpath, V-Carve toolpath is the only toolpath that will automatically calculate the depth of cut based on the width between the lines that it's cutting and the angle of the bit. How deep does it need to cut for those lines to meet at a V based on the angle of the bit and the space between the lines that it has to cut between? So that 120-degree V-bit, even though my design will look exactly the same as what Burl's carving with his 30, mine's going to be much shallower than Burl's because it's going to take less of a depth of cut to get to that V shape and everything.
Yeah, and where I used that, if remember on the shows, we did the LED lights, and those letters for our logo were pretty big. And so when you got big cavities and you don't want to create a pocketing feature, then that's where those 120s or the not as sharp of an angle will be beneficial when it comes to that.
Yeah. And what Burl's talking about, imagine the digital wood carver sign that's over my head. We carved one in LED lights, and the letters of the word digital are quite wide. And on the 3/8-inch acrylic that we were cutting through, if we were to use that 60-degree or that 30-degree, even the 90-degree V-bit, it would want to cut through the material. So we would have to flatten the depth, limit the depth.
Right.
And the 120-degree allows us to get that nice V cut.
Yeah, that V point. Yeah, especially in clear plastic like that, it gives it a smooth look. It's still frosted look, but it gives you that smooth look.
Yeah. Now, Burl,
I do
90-degree V bit. This is another now.
Yes.
We're talking V carving and all, but I want to show kind of engraving bits. As well. This is a 90-degree V bit, but you'll notice it has a 1/8-inch or it's a 16th-inch flat tip on there, so it doesn't come straight to a point. It's got a flat tip. So that in the software, the Vectric software, it's considered an engraving bit versus a V bit. So that's all. Engraving bits have flat tips, guys and girls. That's all you got to remember.
Yeah, Laney, one of the questions is what the brand or number of that 120 bit. Do you remember where you got yours from? I think we got them from the same place.
Well, this is an Amana tool.
Okay.
And bear with me a second. This is embarrassing here, but I'm blind as a bat, so hold on a second. It is the Amana 45770. And actually, Burl, I grabbed the wrong one. This is a 150-degree V-bit. I grabbed 150, not the 120. I have the 120 as well, but the 150-degree V-bit is item number or tool number 45770.
Okay.
My magnifying glass on that.
Now, in one of the sets that we're going to show a little bit later, and we're going to probably jump around here a little bit, but while we're talking about the V-bits, they do make, and in one of our sets, DWC 110 is an insert type of a bit. This is it comes from Amana, so it is, and you can see how tall it is. So this could do a lot of those V cuttings in those one pass where you wouldn't have to take multiple passes. But you can, if you can see it there, it has a screw where you can take that blade out and replace just the blade, because that's a big chunk of metal there on that. But that's another one, and we'll show that set. And that's but that is I believe, well, I'll tell you here in just a second.
That is a 60-degree. I don't know what
correct. Yep, 60-degree insert V-bit. Yep.
Yeah, and as Burl said, we're going to show that bit set later. That's part of our 5-piece sign making set. That
it is.
Well,
let's move on to our next.
Let's talk about end mills.
Yep, that's what I was grabbing. And I've got a spiral up 1/4 inch here that we're going to show. And then we've got a nice little one for doing some very detailed that I also want to show. This is a 1/4 inch. We don't carry every straight cutter out there, but if I get it here in focus, that's a spiral up. We offer a down, an up is the two different ones in the 1/4 inch when it comes to that. Your advantages, obviously, for cutting the spiral up, it's a better cutting bit. It's pulling that dust and those chips out away from your cuts. One of the disadvantages of that is the edge of your board, especially like your plywoods and stuff that is a multiple layer laminate type things. It tends to want to flake or cause those edges to chip. So they do make one that looks just like this, and I did not have one in front of me, but it looks just like this, but instead of that spiral going up, it will actually go down. Now, cutting wise, that's taking the dust and stuff to go down, but what it does is it eliminates, or doesn't necessarily, it helps with the chipping up. So your material is forced down against itself instead of being pulled up where it doesn't have a backing when it's pulled up. They do make straight cutters too.
Yeah. Now, Burl, if you could hold, I got the straight cutter. So if you could
Nice.
hold your bit up,
Yep.
So this is a 1/4 inch straight cutter. Let me see if I can kind of
Yep.
get the focus there. The flutes are straight versus a spiral. Burl's holding an upcut spiral. This is a straight cutter. And then, of course, there's a down cut. Now, to add to that category, there's also what's called a compression end mill. And that compression is a combination of an upcut and a downcut spiral bit together. And Burl, my rule of thumb with end mills is generally hardwoods. When I'm doing profile cuts or pocket cuts and all, I will use an upcut spiral bit because it pulls those chips out of the way. If I am working with plywood, or if I'm doing grooving like mortise and tenon where a joint has to go together, then I will use a down cut spiral because that kind of, even though it's pushing those down, it's keeping that top from chipping because of that downward force, and it's giving a nice looking joint when I work with joints and plywood. So whether I'm hardwood or plywood, as far as that go, if the hardwood has joints in it that I'm cutting, rabbets, dados, and grooves, I will use the down cut for that, but mostly I use it for plywood. You know.
And I do want to point out, we don't sell a combination, but a lot of I've got a 5100 owner in particular that does a lot of laminates and stuff like that, and they will use it. Number one, they've got a lot of power, as far as horsepower when it goes to that, but it also, where they're cutting out like cabinets and putting those full sheets on there, it gives them nice finish on the bottom and the top. Generally, you got to go with just a little bit bigger bit when you use those combinations. I know they do make them down in the smaller, but for the most part, those will get up a little bit bigger. One of the things, can you hold your straight cutter up just a little bit? One of the things I want to point out, I know yours, can you kind of point the end of it towards us?
Yes.
His straight cutter does cut in the center, but you have to watch. Some straight cutters will not cut in that very center point. And you have to, when you do use those type of bits, you're going to have to use like a ramping style toolpath. Otherwise, it does not cut all the way, everything out of the center of it.
Correct. And so instead of a plunge cut, which a bit where the blades or the cutters do not come all the way to the center of the bit, like this one does, you cannot plunge down. You have to ramp in, exactly what Burl's saying, because there's nothing there to cut and move that material. So you're just, forcing it into it and all. Now, there you go.
I wanted to point this one out. This is it's a 1/4 inch shank, but it's an 1/8 inch end mill. It is a very nice for cutting out like your pockets or doing profiles and stuff like that. It's a very nice bit, but I will tell you, because it's 1/8 inch diameter, you got to be careful with it. It can be just a little bit fragile. I mean, that's got a nice
1 3/32 inch depth of cut.
Yes, I was going to say
4 flute bit.
Yes.
And let's talk about flutes for a second, Burl. 4 flute versus 2 flute. So the 4 flutes means smaller gullets. Those gullets are those grooves in between the flutes, guys and girls. And so therefore that bit, when it's spinning, you need to, it can't remove the material fast enough, not as fast as a 2 flute bit can. So you have to slow down your feed rate a bit to give that bit time to remove material and all. But that is a 4 flute. It means it has 4 cutters spiraling around.
It's a nice little cutter, but that slowing down. I always warn people when they use this one. You're always better to be conservative. Going slower, you can always speed up. It is a nice bit, though, when you're doing pocketing and profiling. You can get some detail where you can't get in the 1/4 inch or larger bits.
Or larger tool.
Exactly. So and I wanted to point
out. We don't have one to show, but from there's also a 16th inch.
Yes, I've got one out in my shop.
Tiny guy. Yeah, it's a little tiny guy, and it very fragile and stuff, but don't drop it because it'll break. Now, Burl, if you could, what I'd like you to do for a quick second is I want you to talk about the ball nose bits. I believe that's kind of what we're going to discuss next. And I'm going to put you on full screen because there's one bit that I wanted to have here that I don't have, and I'm going to grab it real quick while you're talking about the two different ball nose bits and things. So I'm going to put you on full screen, and I'll be back in a jiff.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. I'm going to get them out here. What we've got is a 1/4 inch ball nose, and then we've got our conical bits that I love for doing our 3Ds. So let's do just a little bit of review. We got the V bits that does our V carving. We got the straight bits that does profile or cutouts, or it does pocketing where it takes out a certain section inside of it. And then our ball nose or round tip bits are going to do our 3-dimensional or our relief cutting where you have a shape and it'll follow over top of it. This is a 1/4 inch ball nose bit. This is a 2 flute. When it comes to that, a lot of times this will be more of your roughing when you're doing that. And in the V-carve or Aspire, we can create up a roughing toolpath or a finish. Another area that this would work well for is if you don't have a lot of detail. Maybe you've got like a bowl or something that's pretty, has a good shape to it, where you can use a larger bit. This one's obviously going to do a better job of removing material than our smaller bits, but you won't get the detail if you're doing something that has a lot of detail. Let me pull this smaller one. So this is a RU 2075RN. When it comes to that, that's the 1/4 inch ball nose. We do have an SC66, which is a 1/8 inch ball nose. I didn't have one here. I've got one in our set so we can show, but really it's the same as this little 16th inch radius or 16th inch diameter SC64. I don't know how old these bits are, but they were designed for the CNC world, and I absolutely love them. And the reason I love them, and they're a little more expensive, is it gives you the detail of that 16th inch diameter, but because of the angle that it comes out like this, that where it has the angle here, the body of your bit is a little stronger. So if we made this thing a 16th inch diameter, like our end mill like this, that 16th inch diameter, that length would not, you would be breaking them quite often. But because it's got the angle there, it's got that meat or that beef behind it, it can still hold up to some pretty good cutting, but it gives you the detail of that. And once again, over your 3D relief, this is a bit for getting those detail where you can really get down into those corners and your step overs and stuff like that to give it. So that's the 16th inch ball nose there.
Yeah, and Burl, on your the 2 bits, if you could, if you still have the 1/4 inch, the 1/4 inch ball, and that's the 16th right there, right? Or is that the?
This is the 16th, yes.
Yeah. So guys, the tapered ball nose bits, they have, if you look to the one to the right, the 1/4 inch, my right, it might be Burl's left, but it is not a tapered bit. It is a 1/4 inch straight ball nose.
Yeah.
The one that is the 16th is a 1/4 inch tapered ball nose. So there's a tapered angle there. And when you are calculating your tool pass that you're going to be using that tapered ball nose bit, the one thing you want to look at is make sure when you're choosing the bit, you're not choosing a ball nose bit, you're choosing a tapered ball nose bit, because the toolpath has to take into account the angle of that taper. So
if you're trying to create a straight boundary or a line straight up, yes, you can't with this, because obviously you got that angle there. If you're trying to create a straight edge, you'll always have that angle. Do you know what that angle is right off the top of your head?
That is a
11 degree, 22.
11 degree. Hold on, I got it right here. I don't know why I'm sitting there guessing. Right here in front of me, sir. That the white side.
Hey, how about 5.4? Yeah. If you look at our has all our technical information.
Right, but now that's the Amana. You were holding the white side, correct?
You're correct. You're
Side is
correct.
an 11-degree taper.
Okay, that's what I was thinking when I said, well, and that may be half of the angle.
No. 5.4 is
the Amana. Okay.
So yeah, you guys and girls, you have to understand that those bits have different taper angles to get the same result, right? They're both 16th inch tapered ball noses, but they have a different angle to get there, and we have to keep that in mind. And when you have your tools and you're adding your tool database, you will have that information from the tool manufacturer, on the package and things like that.
Sorry to throw that curveball.
No, that was good. I got it here. And the 1/8 inch, for anyone that is, it's a 7.6 degree taper. Now, Burl, what I wanted you to do is you have that 1/8 inch end mill, the gold one, ZRN coated one, and you have your 1/4 inch upcut spiral. If you could hold those two together up in the air, and I'm going to hold...
Sorry, I put the one back.
I can do it here, bro. I want you to notice on my bits here, and Burl will bring his up and stuff. Let me get in front of my camera here. One is got no coating on it. It's just a straight carbide cutter. And the other has a gold coating on it. That gold coating is ZRN, zirconium nitrate coating. And what that does, that extra coating, that gold coating there that Burl has in his hand as well, that coating allows for cutting in multiple materials: woods, plastics, composites, even your non-ferrous metals, aluminum, copper, brass. So that little 1/8 inch bit that Burl has there can cut in all those different materials, while the other 1/4 inch end mill that does not have that coating, it's just, it's a wood, probably your plastics and your acrylics you can use on that with that 1/4 inch bit, but I wouldn't. It's not a non-ferrous metal bit or anything like that. But the other one in his other hand is same thing. Here. Now, Burl, what I ran out for, and let me tell you, I'm getting old. That I broke a sweat on that sprint out to the shop and all. But what I wanted to show here are I've got 3 different bits here. They're called O flute bits. O flute bits, and the O flute bits have a single spiral. They have a single flute spiral. They have different coatings. This one's just a plain coating. This one, I'm sorry, that was the ZRN coating. It's hard to say there. That one's the gold ZRN coating. Sorry about the blurriness, guys and girls. This one is just O flute with the plain coating. And this one has a pretty rainbow coloring, and that is a Spectra coated bit. And this allows for cutting in different ceramics and things like that. Now, my O flute bits that I'm showing you here, these are for cutting in plastics. So they're ideal for plastics. These 2 O flute bits here are plastic bits and things, plastics and composites, acrylics and things, plexiglass and all that stuff. But now this O flute bit, this is an aluminum metal bit, aluminum metal cutter. All 3 of these tools are from Amana. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the O flute bits, because you're going to see that out there in the world. They're called O flutes, even though there is one flute. They're called O flutes. I'm not sure how that came about or what that name is. I don't know the history, but I just wanted to show those off as well, Burl.
Yeah, one of the things with plastics, and you had brought it up a little bit, and you said acrylics. I kind of cringe sometimes cutting acrylics because it wants to create this little molting ball on your cutter or around the cutter, and
your plexiglasses and extruded plastics and stuff. I do not like cutting those. I do, like Burl, I cringe a little bit about that because you're gonna have to babysit it because of that multi-ball.
But that O flute was designed to help you cut some of those. The single flute, you don't need as many as the flute, but also the relief angle on the back on a lot of them. I don't know, but those particular ones has a bigger relief, so you don't create the heat that you will with some of your other bits.
And that's exactly what it does. It's got that little fingernail.
Just a little hook.
A little fingernail right in the tip there, and it's got a big relief to release those kind of.
But I will tell you not to fret on plastic. So I'm not an expert on plastic. I'll just throw my little wisdom out there. There's all kinds of plastics, acrylics, polycarbonates. Those are the two clear that I use on occasion. Your polycarbonate will actually cut better with a router, but don't put that thing under a laser, a big laser. It will turn it black and brown and everything else. Where acrylics is kind of the opposites. We don't really like them in the router world, but we love them on the laser world. They give you a nice clear cut because it is heat, like the heat will create, or that light will create a clear. So in the laser world, we love acrylics. It's just kind of an opposite a little bit there. So now, the O-flute,
yeah. Let me see if I can touch on this, because you're saying acrylics. Now, extruded plastic, like your plexiglass, Lexan, and things like that, I do not like cutting. That's that molten ball.
Right.
But cast resin, cast acrylic, for cutting, like your edge light siding, your edge lit acrylic signs and all, not too bad. It does pretty, it does good. But the extruded plastics is where it chips, it breaks, it melts and molten and builds up that little ball of plastic on the bits and all. So don't, guys and girls, if you're, don't, like Burl and I said, we're not experts on this stuff as far as plastics go, but cast acrylics. If you're ever doing projects like edge lit signing and things like that, that's what you want to look for. You want to stay away from your extruded acrylics.
Right. Well, and that's my main point of being is do a little bit of homework on the plastics. Plastics is just like woods and metals. I mean, there's a lot of different types of plastics out there. We cut a lot of HDPE, high density polyethylene, and it cuts just like it cuts great. Gives you a good finish. Take a little bit of time on it. So don't be afraid of plastics, but do a little bit of homework, do a little bit of bits, speeds, all that, and you can get through them. So okay, that was the straight end mills. Let's no, the ball nose. We already went through the different styles.
Can we talk about form tools? Well, all right. So when Burl says the different styles, those are the three common styles of bits that you're going to use on an everyday basis with your CNC carving. And the diameter, of course, of those bits, the size and the angle of your V bits and your end mill, that will change depending on the job that you need to get done. But there are many other styles of bits out there.
Yes.
And one of those
before you go into the profile, I got to throw in the sales pitch
there
here.
you go. Yeah, can we
the sets that we offer? Is that okay? And then we'll get into the profile. I think everybody can see it. This is our white side that we sell. It's a 705 bit set. It is, and of the bit sets, obviously it's the least expensive. We sell this one for $150, but it comes with a 60-degree V bit, a 90-degree V bit, 1/4 inch upcut straight end mill, and then it comes with an 1/8 and a 16th inch tapered ball nose. So this gives you all three of those styles of bits. So anytime, and we sell a lot of our bit sets to people that are starting. And the nice thing about it is all our bit sets will allow you to do different, pretty well all the different things that you can do with your CNC. So this is a white side 705 piece, if I can talk here. 155.
Yeah, that the white side 705 is a great starter bit set. If you're getting into CNC carving and you've only got a few bits and you're wondering what can I get, that 5-piece bit set will do 90% of the material that you're wanting to do.
Got a reflection of you there, Laney. I'll try to tilt it.
That's okay. I'm going to bring you in here. There we go.
Okay.
Now, these tools are Amana tools, but they're branded by us, Digital Wood Carver. But they're manufactured by Amana, and this is our 8-piece 2D and 3D carving bit set.
Yep. Let me start over here once again. Since we started the V cut, 60 and a 90. Okay. When it comes to that, and then you have two of your 1/4 inch cutters. You'll have an up and a down. So this is you'll have your down spiral here. I believe that one's the down and this is the up. I'd have to look at them closely. But also we have your 1/8 inch, that really detailed end mill. And then in our doing our 3D images, we have a 1/4 inch ball nose, and then the 1/8 and then the 16th. One of the things I want to point out, I've got it here. When you get this, obviously it comes in a nice wooden case that store in. But one of the things that Amana does that I really, really like is they give a lot of information for what you can cut. They also have for the Vectric software, you can go to their site and download the tool database of that. But they give different materials and, of course, all of the specs, but they give you a nice sheet here explaining all of those different woods. And then here's some V cutting bits on that. So along with the bits, they give you a little more technical information that comes along with it if you want to know what you can cut, like MDF, fiberglass, some graphite composites, and different things like that. They have that information along with that. So this is their 8-piece bit set when it comes to here. And then I have one more bit set here.
Now I'm going to jump in while Burl's pulling up another bit set. The Amana 108. It's the DWC 108 bit set. That is a $300 bit there. Now, Burl, while you're getting the other bit set ready, I just want to answer a quick question here.
Sure.
Troy asks, what would be the best bit for engraving or carving marble? And Troy, the best bit for that is going to be a diamond tipped engraving bit for carving in those stones like corian marble and things. So a diamond tip bit. And Joseph, what about carving in corian? Corian it's a man-made plastic. So if you're pocketing out the corian and stuff, like making lithophanes, the O flute bit works out very well for that. But also those ZRN coated tapered ball noses or Spectra tapered ball nose. Burl's got one in his package right there. That tapered ball nose, those are great for those corian lithophane cuts and things. So I just wanted to throw those questions out there.
And I've cut, corian it is a hard product, but I've done a lot of different cuttings in it, whether 3D relief, that's okay. 3D relief or cutouts, and it does well with as long as you stay with at least your solid carbide. Obviously your coatings will help you on that. And this is kind of our last set. This has been kind of our newest, and we call it our CNC Sign-Making set. And what we do with that is it gives you a couple options that we don't have in our other set. It gives you the V-bit. Sorry, I'm looking at it here. And this is that 30 degree, 30 degree V-bit. And once again, that's designed for those small images or the small lettering and text, where it will allow it to go down in there a little bit deeper so that you can get a little more definition with your letters and stuff like that. So that's the 30 degree bit. And then this comes with that insert V groove. It's a 60 degree bit on that. It's a little bit bigger, so it gives you a really tall, won't have to take as many passes on that, on the V bit. And then it comes with the 16th degree tapered ball nose, and then it comes with a 1/4 inch spiral down cut on that, and then the 1/8 inch upcut on those bits. Once again, it comes with a nice illustration of what materials each one of them will cut and all the specs that you need with that. So,
exactly. And those are the last 3 bits, are actually all 4 of them except for the insert, the 60 degree with the insert. Those are Spectra coated bits. Spectra coating is kind of like a ceramic coating that allows the bit to extend the life of the bit, keeps it running cooler and things and cuts and stuff, and also gives you a variety of materials that you can you carve in. And that little pamphlet that comes with the bit set is good. And Burl, that bit set comes in at $199.
that is correct.
Yeah,
that is correct.
Yes. And for those of you that are with us tonight, we've got about 70 of you watching and everything. Stick with us till the end of all this, and we'll make an announcement on one of our bit sets. So
now you go into your profile. I just wanted to kind of point out our different bit sets that we offer on that. And we do sell the individual on our website. If you want to know what all we sell, our website has a full listing of our bits.
Absolutely. So I want to jump into a couple of more questions. What about having you your bit sharpened versus buying a new bit. What is your thoughts on sharpening versus buying? Now, while Burl picks up the bits that he dropped, I'm going to tell you that I am an advocate of replacing the bits versus sharpening, unless you have a very, very good toolsmith that you can take your bits to sharpen, that knows what they're doing. Because if any slight change in the profile, or when you're sharpening those bits, you're removing material, so that diameter is changing, from what it was. So you have to make those adjustments and everything. And if you have a toolsmith that doesn't know, they're not on their game, for small tools. They might be on it for big blades and things like that, but for small blades and cutters, they could ultimately change that profile of that cutter, and that could kind of throw off your carvings and stuff. Bro, what are your thoughts on sharpening versus buying?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I have a diamond, sharpener in the fluids that you can run on there, and I know a lot of people will really like those and do that. And I'm kind of like with you. You will get more life out of a router bit. And it kind of, I'll use the analogy of chainsaw chains. When I use a chainsaw, I'm not an expert at sharpening chainsaw chains. Okay. The first time I use a new blade, I mean, it cuts good. And there are some people out there that probably can make that, chainsaw cut better than it was new. I'm not that person. If you knew what you was doing and had some fixtures where you could get and maintain these angles and stuff, then you could. So, resharpening, when you send it out for a service, from what I understand, you're going to pay. Now, obviously, it depends on the bit, how expensive it was to start with, but you're going to pay about a third to not quite a half of the cost of a new bit. This is experience that I've had when I've had some resharpened in my manufacturing. We did some stuff and had it priced, and it's just one of those things that, as Laney was talking about, your bit itself will change. If you take it to professional, they're going to take off quite a bit of material. So your diameter, you'll have to do some offsets on that, depending on what you're doing with it. And some of them won't even mess with certain type of bits. So there is some things you can play with, a little hand. I have not, maybe straight bits and stuff that are straight, but start when you go a spiral. I mean, I can't maintain an angle. The only thing that the diamond would do well on that is if you have a buildup on it. Obviously, you could get that, if that's a tough buildup on that. But I'm with you. There's really very few bits that I would be comfortable in resharpening, just from the standpoint it's not feasible.
And let me just touch one last bit on that. Okay, your straight bits, such as, let's say the dovetail cutter has kind of a straight flute on it, and this straight cutter has a straight flute on it. Taking what Burl says, sometimes you're cutting pines and materials with a lot of resin and pitch. Yes. When it comes to maintaining your bits, cleaning them off, and then maybe on a stone or even, sandpaper on the flat, just running that just a couple of times on the flat, never sharpen the angle, and everything. You can do that and everything as a touch up, as part of maintenance. But as far as full on sharpening, I'm an advocate of replacing.
And they do make some products out there for keeping saw blades and router bits, sure, that keeps that off. But what you're doing is, when you allow that buildup to be on that blade, what it does is you got to have a little bit of relief. Or what happens is that back body of your cutting edge. See if I can get my angle here. So you have your cutting edge here, that back body here. If it builds up with material, then you're going to create friction. That material that's building up on there, you don't have a clearance now. It's going to cause friction on it. And when you do that, then obviously heat is generated, and it's kind of a snowball. Things go south, and nothing goes.
Let me show a result of that. So we were talking about end mills. This is a very large end mill. This is a surfacing blade cutter, right? But let's look at this bit. If we look at this bit closely, not too closely, but you can see that buildup on that flat of that black pitch there. And if we look closely at the tip, you can see the buildup here and here on the cutter. You know, I haven't cleaned this bit since I just surfaced something. You know, I was surfacing some pine boards and things, but I haven't cleaned it, and so I have that pitch build up there. Well, notice that you know, as it builds up, how dark and black it is, because it's you know, it's not letting the cutter do what it needs to do, and so it's causing heat to build up and burning and all. So cleaning your bits is a must. All right, now, and this is an inch and 3/8 diameter spoil board end mill. Now this happens to be a magnate bit. We talked about Whiteside, Mana. Those are our two brands that we work with, the two companies we work with in support. They make great blades and bits. But one of my other favorites out there that I like, for especially when it comes to surface cutters, is I do like the magnate bits and all. Now, common bits, end mills, which are your spiral, upcut, downcut, and compression we just talked about, your V bits, and your ball nose, your tapered or straight ball nose. These bits are those are your everyday bits you're going to use for V carving, pocket cutting, profile cutting, 3D rough cutting, 3D finish cutting, and things like that. Coming out of that realm, we have what's called form bits, and these form bits have special profiles. So here is an OG bit, a little OG cutter. It's got that OG profile, and notice how the blade goes all the way around. So this is plungeable, right? You don't want to use bits with those bearings on it, guys. This particular profile here, that is a rope cutting bit. That's a rope profile. It kind of creates that twisted rope look when you carve on it and everything. A little bit bigger. This is a barley twist bit. Got that nice rounded tip on there. Barley twist bit. Big diameter bits. Here's a little beading bit.
Yep.
So
that was the one I was going to ask if you had.
That's a little round over beading bit. Has a little point on it and everything. And we're going to show in a minute. We're going to jump over into software and talk about these. I'm going to show you some of these tools.
Yeah. You can create a cool texture with a beading bit by just creating a hatch type of cross pattern of that. I've done that surface, like on jewelry boxes and stuff like that. Created that pattern and it looked very cool.
Yeah. Now I need to clean this one up, but this is a unique one, guys and girls. This is referred to as a bird mouth bit. I call it a sideways V bit, but it's a threading bit. So it's for cutting internal threads. You know, if you're making nuts and bolts on your CNC, your nuts and all this. So that's the V that comes out to the side. It's a 90 degree. Believe it or not, that little guy's a 90 degree. Let's get it to focus again. But the cutter, come on now, focus, is coming out to the side, you know, and it is not a plungeable bit. There are no cutters on the bottom, so you do not plunge that in. You ramp it in. All right, so these are form tools. Now, when it comes to the tool database in the Vectric software, your end mills, those upcut spiral, downcut spiral, your ball nose bits and your V bits, those categories are in there for when you're adding a tool. When it comes to tools with special profiles, such as this Roman OG bit here and everything, those are considered form tools. So in order to add these tools to your tool database, you have to draw to scale the right side of the bit. And we're going to show you how some of the tool companies are helping, you know, with that drawing of the bits by providing profiles and things, files now and stuff. When it comes to bits such as keyhole bits, which I don't have one here, or dovetail bits like dovetail cutters, these cutters have an undercut, right? That angle comes in, it undercuts and all. So you will not add these to your tool database. You have to add them as an end mill, a straight end mill. It's called a dummy bit. Basically, the software is going to read the feeds and speeds and pass depth and everything, but you're going to have the dovetail in your router running that toolpath that you're using the dummy end mill with. And I'll show you the tool database here in a second. And so form tools, basically anything that has a special profile, right? Now, I want to really quick touch on, we've been throwing around the word end mill, right? Typically in the CNC world, end mills are going to be your flat bits that have the upcut spiral, downcut spiral, and things like that. They're going to be referred to as an end mill. But if you hear the term router bit, CNC bit, end mill, you know, those are all the same. They all mean the same thing, right? In some form or another, these are all end mills. But in the you know, the CNC world, a tapered ball nose bit is not going to be called a tapered ball nose end mill. It'll most likely be called a tapered ball nose bit. But an upcut spiral end mill is going to be a 1/4 inch upcut spiral. It will be listed in your tool database as a 1/4 inch end mill, right? So end mill, ENDMILL, is a common term that really means router bit. So if you go to the store and you go and like, and I'm looking for a 1/4 inch end mill, you're not going to see the word end mill. You're going to see 1/4 inch straight bit, 1/4 inch upcut spiral, you know, things like that. But you won't. But it's an end mill. That's what it is. And
in the metal world is where a lot of that comes from, Laney.
Yep.
Is
cool.
End mills come from the manufacturing world.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, bro. Can we jump into the software and show these guys?
Yeah, let's go through the profiles. I got a couple bits here when we get done. And would you like for me to run out and grab my keyhole while you're going through showing some of that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then we'll finish up with that. So go ahead, if you'll take the screen. I know you're going to share your screen and show a little bit of in the software.
Share screen here, and then I will bring that full force. There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So while Burl is running and getting a keyhole bit, I wanted to show you some of the things, and we're going to talk about different types of toolpaths. I've got like a little, this is almost like a Ninja Warrior course for V-carving or for CNC machining. We've got a little bit of model work. We're going to work with some modeling toolpaths. We've got some profile and shape cuttings, maybe some pocket cuttings, and we've got some open vectors we're going to work with and all. So we got that little ninja course going in there. But I want to take a minute and I want to talk about what tool companies are doing now to help us with adding tools to our tool database. Such as Whiteside. Whiteside has a tool library or an individual tool where you can go to whiteside.com and you can download their tool library, or you can download tool by tool, the tool file, to import into your tool database. So if I wanted to import a new tool, I could come down to my tool database and click on Add New Tool, and I could actually not Add New Tool, you goofball. Let's hit cancel on that. Import, not Add New Tool. Import. Let's go back in there. Import a tool database file, and even though it's a single file for a single tool, it's still referred to as a tool database file. And so if I come into my downloads here, I have this .tool file that that is for the Whiteside 2050, and that's a little 1/8 inch roundover. So I can click on that. I can click open, and that will import that tool in. And if I come down here and look at it, it will already have that tool added with some of the common settings and things. So just right there, I was able to import it in. Now, one of the things, most of the settings are correct on this, but for your machines, you want to take a look at the feed rate and make sure that you adjust the feed rate appropriate for your machine. Now they've got these tools set up for commercial grade units and all. So when you import it right in, right off the bat, you know, it's not going to be correct on the feed rate, you know, unless you have one of those industrial commercial units and things and all. So for our mid-size units and stuff, this bit we'd run around 50 inches a minute. We'd click apply to make that change, and we have that tool. And then you can just drag and drop it anywhere you want. And you'll notice I've got it here. I added it a couple times, so I already had it in there. But aside from the files, the actual tool files, they actually provide also DXFs, DXF vectors of the profiles of the cutters. Now, if I go into, I've just imported this Whiteside. This is that 2050 that we just imported into the tool database. But if I did not have the .tool file, I would have to draw the right half of that bit to add it to the tool database. And bear with me a second there. Let's go in here and turn off some layers. Let me move that back. All right. And when you guys and girls, when you ungroup things and all, make sure that you are on the appropriate layer, or things will start popping up and you'll go, what in the world was that? But if we look at this profile here, notice they've got this straight edge, they've got this rounded edge, this edge here, and this edge here. So the left half of this we can pretty much delete. Now, in order to add this to the tool database, this has to be one continuous vector. So you have to take all of these individual vectors that they've drawn, and hopefully they'll clean that up down the road. And but hey, we're getting them to add these tool profiles for us is wonderful. So I'm not complaining. All we have to do in the software is go to the join tool, and you'll see I have 4 individual vectors selected. When I join it, it'll be one open vector. So now it's one item. And all I have to do is select that, and I can come into my tool database, come down to add new tool. And when I choose the word form tool from the drop-down list, it'll automatically throw that in. It'll finish the completion of the drawing and put in the full diameter. So this is why it's important to draw it to scale. Okay. So white side is doing that for us. And again, I had my layer turned on there. But Amana is doing it for us. Now, Amana, same thing with their tools. This is a little beading bit here. All we have to do is we have to get that right side of that bit, right? So if we went into node editing on Amana's tool, if I zoom in really tight, I'll see that little center point there. I can cut the vector right there, and then I can remove that left side. Oops, it didn't cut because I wasn't quick enough. Here, let's get in there. I added, let's cut it this time instead of adding a point. Cut the vector. There we go. Wonderful. And so I can delete that left side because we don't need it. And then again, all you have to do is make sure you have it selected when you go to add it to your tool database. And again, I'll just add it as a form tool, and it will draw that bit in there and put in the diameter. And then I got to go in and put the settings in. And that's going to be something we'll talk about here in a minute, about settings and all, and how do you know what are the correct settings and things like that, because that's our toughest battle that we face in the CNC world, is feeds and speeds and things like that. But so thank you to all the tool companies. Magnate's jumped in as well with creating their profiles for their tool database, and I'm only showing just a couple. I mean, they have their whole library of tools, all the profiles, so we can import those DXFs. They do not have a tool file that we can import right into the tool database. We have to import using the half profile add form tool method with Magnate. But still, thanks for those tool companies that are doing that for us, so we don't have to sit there and draw these out ourselves. If we did not have these files, if you bought something off of Amazon and it's a form tool and you cannot find a profile for it, simply draw out the right half and make sure it's to scale. Do all your measurements and stuff. All right, so we'll leave that, and let's go back into here, and let me clean up my mess with that guy right there and hit delete. All right, Burl's back with us. So let's get Burl back up here. How you doing, Burl? We were just talking about adding some tools to the tool database before we get into our Olympics. I told him I had a Ninja Warrior course of designing to show them different tools with all these little samples I got coming up. But were you able to get your keyhole bit?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So guys and girls, this is a keyhole cutter, and I'm going to show you how to create a keyhole toolpath in just a minute when I show you all these other toolpaths. But now this is also a form tool, but it's also a tool that has an undercut because of the it comes down and it comes up and cuts, and then in the neck it cuts and all. So that is also another tool that you would add as a dummy end mill. And Burl, I'm going to put us side by side on our screen with our screen here, and I just want to open up that tool database again and explain to them what I mean by dummy end mill.
Yes.
It's a little blurry here and all, but if you look closely, you're going to see the word dummy bits right here. And I have 2 dummy bits. I have a, and I'm going to make us disappear for a second, Burl. I have 2 dummy bits. I have a keyhole dummy bit for my keyhole bit, and I have a dovetail dummy bit for my 3/8" dovetail cutter. And these are added in the tool database as an end mill. They would have the same diameter as your cutters, your keyhole cutter or your dovetail bit. So same diameter as that. And then most of the time, I'm wanting my dovetail bit to do a single pass because I've already cleared out the waste material. And I do not want my dovetail bit making passes. So the depth of cut is the full, cut of the carbide or the flute of that cutter. And then you would set your feeds and speeds. And what the software does is when I'm doing a keyhole toolpath or I'm doing a dovetail pass or something, I'm using this bit, but in my router, in my spindle, I have that keyhole cutter or I have that dovetail cutter. The only thing the software is doing is reading the diameter, it's the pass depth, the feed rate, and the plunge rate, and it's taking those in effect. It doesn't, really care what router we have in there, what bit we have in there, but we want to make sure we use the correct bit or the correct dummy bit for the correct tool. And if I could bring Burl and I back up here in this very small screen over to the left, look very closely. That's my little 3/8 inch dovetail cutter, and the cutting flutes are 3/8 of an inch. So that's my little dovetail, and I got a big one too. And so I have a dummy bit for that. It's just not in that tool database. So Burl, we've got a little bit of a obstacle course here of different types of things that people may run into, whether it be 3D cutting, or they might be making a sign and doing some V carving.
Yes.
They could be doing some profile cutting out shapes and parts and things, for pieces and stuff. And then they could be doing some profile cutting, right? Following a line with a bit. Well, guys, we're going to talk about, we're going to take a quick moment. Burl, we're an hour in, but I just want to get through this because I think this is very informative. And if you guys and girls have any questions, here's a good time to ask. But let's talk about this just quickly. When you have a 3D model cut in your design when you have a 3D model cut in your design, there are two tool paths that you're going to use. You will not use all the others. You will use two: your 3D rough cut and your 3D finish cut toolpath. Okay, those are the two toolpaths for your 3D model. Now, most times when you're calculating or creating a toolpath, you have to select the vector of the object that you're wanting to, create that toolpath for. But when it comes to a 3D rough and a 3D finish cut, the software is going to look at the visible model, what model is in our project, and it's going to calculate the toolpath off of that visible model. So in this case, I had this nice little decorative heart here, if you will. And my rough cut is typically going to be that end mill. That's your workhorse. I'm going to typically use an end mill to kind of hog away the waste material. And then my ball nose bit is the 3D finish cut, right? Now, when it comes to carving a model, there's a couple of options here as far as how you're going to carve. Model as the boundary, material as the boundary, or selected vectors as the boundary, or selected levels as the boundary. And what this means is if I wanted to carve this 3D model heart right where it is inside of this project and not mill away any of the surface, I just wanted to carve that model right there, then I would typically use the model as the boundary for that cutter, right? So that means that bit is going to stay within the boundary of the model. Now, if I wanted to do a plaque, and let's say this board here was my plaque, and I wanted that model standing proud, that object standing proud, then I would have to use the material as the boundary, meaning that it's going to mill the entire material away from around that model, giving that three-dimensional raised effect, right? And if I wanted to a selected vector as the boundary, that means that I have some type of boundary around my model, and I want to limit the cutter to that area. So selected vector, right? So, and your rough cut is hogging away the waste material. So if I were to calculate this, this just very simply, I'll use the selected vector as the boundary. With my 1/4 inch end mill, I'm going to be doing a Z-level raster back and forth like a printer along my X-axis. I'm going to simply calculate that. When it runs through the calculation, it's going to transfer us over into the preview. And let's kind of get front and center in here. And as you can see, my cut was limited to that boundary. And the preview is basically, it's a rough cut. It's hogging away the waste material. Now, I'm not going to show the whole preview in a high resolution. So let me stop that and turn that resolution down, or else we'd be waiting here forever. But that preview cut, it's hogging away the waste material with that end mill, relieving a lot of the material so that the ball nose bit has very little to do and things and all and stuff. So hogging away that waste material. Now, the 3D finish cut toolpath is going to be my detail. This is my guy and girl toolpath. This is the one that's going to do all that detail. So is it going to be a 1/4 inch in ball nose end mill? Is it going to be an 1/8 inch, 16th inch? And that size of that cutter is going to determine how much detail you have in your design and where the radiuses are. If that 1/8 inch bit can get into those radiuses on that model, then you'll get a fairly decent bit carving. And your 1/8 inch bit is typically your go-to ball nose, right, for your 3D cuts. But if I would have had, let's say this was an eagle with a lot of feathers and things, well, then I would want to use a smaller diameter bit to get in there and everything. So here I've got my 16th inch tip ball nose. Again, using the selected vector as the boundary, I'm going to make that 0 and just hit calculate, right? And no suitable vector selected because I didn't have it turned on. There we go. And so once again, it'll calculate within that area to do that 3D finish cut. Okay. So that's all there is to a 3D model. I mean, there's a lot more to 3D modeling and stuff, but when it comes to toolpaths, you have 2 toolpaths that you deal with. That's, you know, all you need to worry about is 3D rough cut, hog away the waste material, 3D finish to do the detail work. And your tapered ball noses, your ball nose bits, that's your 3D finish cut bits, guys and girls. Your end mills are typically going to be your rough cut bits. Okay. All right. So hopefully I'm trying to race through this, guys and girls. Just bear with me. Let's talk about V-carve. What we do every day that, you know, most commonly on our CNC is V-carve signs, or we're V-carving images that we've traced and things and stuff. The V-carve toolpath, very simple. You have a start depth and a flat depth, right? Typically, unless you want the center of this cut to be flat in the bottom of the cut, then you would typically have no flat depth. It'd be turned off because the V-carve toolpath, like I said earlier, is going to calculate how deep it's going to cut based on the angle of your cutter and things. So I don't want a flat depth on this. I want to start at the top of my board, no flat depth. I'm going to use my 60-degree V-bit. And if I calculate this, we come in here, my V cutter will come in and do that nice V carve and everything, you know, and notice we have that nice V-shaped cut at the bottom of the cut. If I were to use a flat depth, let's say the software says, hey, you're going to cut through your material if you try to V-cut this. Or if I just want a flat depth in my design, then this is a limit. It's not a cutting depth, ladies and gentlemen. It's a limit. So through all the other toolpaths in the software, you're going to see the word cut depth, start depth and cut depth. But in the V-carve toolpath, it's a flat depth. You're limiting the cut. So if I limited this to 1/8 of an inch, 0.125, I have the option of letting my V-bit flatten everything out, or I could use a clearance tool. And in this case, I'm going to use a clearance tool. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab an 1/8 inch end mill, slide down to my 1/8 inch end mill there and click select. And if I calculate this up, now I have 2 toolpaths that the software has created for me. One is going to be my end mill to do all the flat work, and one is going to be the V-bit. So if we zoomed in here and kind of focused on that, and I preview those 2 toolpaths, we got a little flat work there. But I want you to notice something. And it's kind of pixelated. I got the quality turned down, but I want you to see these nice, clean little flat spots there, and then you'll see what looks like tool marks here. And that's exactly what that is. Those flat spots are showing where the end mill could fit, right? My 1/8 inch end mill is too big to do the flat work. So the V-bit had to do the flat work. And on a sign like this, I wouldn't choose a flat area clearance tool because there's only 3 small areas that end mill can actually fit in. So I would just let the V-bit do the flat work. And it's just limiting the cut to a certain depth. It's not that pretty V shape. I'm just flattening it off and stuff. So we have our V-Carve toolpath. Now, V-Carve toolpath, your V-bit, 0 to 179 degrees. They make them all different angles, right? Typically 30, 60, and 90 degree V-bits are your most common angle V-bits, but they do come in different angles, like you saw me holding up a 20 degree V-bit and things like that earlier. Your clearance tools, that's typically an end mill. 1/8 inch, 16th inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. It all depends on the design and where the bit can fit. If it can't fit, then the software is going to truncate that toolpath and it will not calculate a clearance toolpath because the bit just couldn't fit, right? So those are modeling and V-carving. Let's talk about profile cutting. Say we're cutting out shapes or something. Now, profile cutting, that's a term that is kind of a misleading in a bit, because a lot of times, you know, people, even the picture here on the profile cut shows this little block being cut out in the icon. But profile cut doesn't necessarily mean you're cutting all the way through the material all the time. You're cutting out parts. 90% of the time when somebody says, I'm going to do a profile cut, they're cutting a part out. But profile cut simply means we are following a single line. So anytime you're carving along a line, on the outside of a line, or inside of a line, if it's a single line, that is a profile toolpath, right? So in this case, I want to cut this star out. So I'm going to cut out 3/4 of an inch deep. I'm going to select my end mill that I think is appropriate for this. In this case, I have the end mill that Burl was holding up, the 1/8 inch end mill with the inch and a 3/32 cutting flute, so it can cut 3/4 of an inch deep. And I'm going to cut on the outside of the line. I want that bit to come and cut out this nice profile and stuff. Now, in the profile toolpath, after you get those main things set, there's a lot of other options in here, and those are called advanced options. And if you don't see these options in your software, that means this box up here is not checked, right? If you only see a few limited options, you don't have the show advanced options checked. In the advanced options, we're not going to get into right now. We will talk a little bit about tabs and stuff, but these are things that you want to look at when you're creating a profile toolpath, whether you're ramping into the cut. We talked about those ramps for those bits that are not plungeable. They don't have those cutters on the end. You have to ramp into the cut and everything. Lead ins and lead outs, and I'm not going to get into that, but that's where you're coming at a distance away and you're leading into the cut, and then when the cut is finished, you're leading out away from the cut. Your order, what order you're cutting in, you know, the software is going to say, hey, from my starting point, which is way down here, when it picks all of these things to cut, if I were doing all these at once as a profile cut, it's going to cut them in a certain order, basically based on the grid. It's going to start from the bottom to the top and carve from left to right. Unless I say, no, you're not. You're going to use the vector selection order, and I could go in and I could hold down my shift key and I could start selecting vectors, and it's going to start cutting those vectors in the order that I select them, right? In this case, I only have one to deal with. So let's calculate this, and I'm not going to put tabs on this right now. I just want to show the cutout. So we're cutting out all the way through the material, and my 1/8 inch bit is taking, passes. When it comes to pass depth, typically the rule of thumb is half the diameter of the bit or less for your pass depth. But in the case of the 1/8 inch, I could do an 1/8 inch pass and feel confident, but I would not want to use that rule of thumb with a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch end mill and things like that, right? So if I double click on this, we have our little star left there, and we've profile cut this star out, right? But a profile cut, as I said, does not necessarily mean you're always cutting things out all the way through. I could still do a profile toolpath. I could say I want to cut 1/8 of an inch deep, and I don't want to use an end mill. I actually want to cut on the line this time, and I would like to use a V-bit. I want to create a nice little V groove star, right? So with a profile toolpath, I can use all types of bits. I could use those form tools that Burl and I showed you. I could use V-bits, end mills, all kinds of things. It's when you're taking and you're following a single line, and whatever you want that, bit to cut that line. In my case, I want to choose my 60-degree V-bit. So we'll come down to V-bits here and choose my 60-degree V-bit on the line. And when I calculate that, We come in here, let's reset our preview. And now I'm V-cutting that little star, right? You know, just a nice little profile cut with that V bit to create that little star impression on my project, right? So profile cut simply means you're following a single line, whether you're cutting on the outside of the line, inside of the line, or on the line. Okay. And if you remember those very basic stuff, you know, you'll be good to go. Burl, is there anything that I missed or need to add to any of those three things that I overshot or anything on that?
No, you did well. You did well.
All
That
right.
was a good combination of the three there. So.
Yeah. And now let's look at, here's another combination here. We have three boxes, 1, 2, 3, and one is going to be a pocket cut. Pocket cut means I'm removing material from within the perimeter of a design. Profile cut, which we just discussed, means I'm following a single line, whether I'm cutting on the inside, outside, or on that line. It's a profile cut. And then we also have a kind of a combination cut. It's in a sense, it's a V-carve toolpath with a flat depth, but it's using a V bit to do kind of a profile cut where it's kind of outlining. But then my pocket cut is going to be my flat tool. So let's look at these three real quick. Let's do the first one, pocket cut. So my pocket toolpath here. Let's get rid of the word pocket. We don't want that in this. I'm going to cut this 1/4 of an inch deep, and I'll use a 1/4 inch end mill. That's fine. Let's go down to our end mills.
And I'll point out one thing of bits that we didn't talk about earlier. When you're talking about the profile, we have what we call a bowl bits that we didn't talk about. But in the pocketing features, what these do is it gives you the feature of like an end mill where there's a flat area, but it gives you a smaller radius around the edges. So those bottom contour or those corners have a little bit of radius to them. They're good bits for doing pocketing, like bowls and stuff like that, where there's cavities. It gives you a little bit of a smoother transition down there in the corners.
Exactly, yeah, and great for chips and dips and bowl trays and all kinds of decorative stuff. Wonderful for around the holidays and all. Let's bounce back over to here. And so with this pocket cut, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to pocket this out. And like Burl said, I could use a bowl and tray bit if I wanted that nice radius at the bottom of the pocket and things and all that stuff. So with this, I'm going to I have two choices here, offset or raster. So offset means it's going to start kind of in the middle and work its way around and around and around and around until it gets to the end of that cut. And then it's going to do a final profile pass, you know, inside to clean up the edges. And a raster cut means that I'm like a printer, back and forth, cutting with the grain. In some pockets, most pockets, I will offset, you know, depending on what it is. But if it's a large pocket, then I raster cut it because I don't want to do a whole lot of sanding, and I want that cutter cutting back and forth with the grain. In this one, I'll just do an example of an offset cut. And somebody popped up climb versus conventional. So basically, climb versus conventional is the direction of the cutter with the rotation, you know, versus the rotation. So if I was climb cutting, which is 95% the default that you're going to be using, as it's cutting around and around and around, it's going with the rotation of the cutter. Did I get that right, bro?
I believe you did correct. I'll check on that if you want to.
If I was conventional cutting, I am cutting in the direction against the rotation. Yeah, because it rotates clockwise. So yes, conventional, I'm cutting against the rotation in the direction, and climb, I'm cutting with the rotation.
That's correct.
You know. And the difference between the two is there's a whole bunch of definition. Look up climb cutting versus conventional cutting on Google for a nice full definition. But basically, a climb cut will tend to give you a cleaner cut. It's kind of shearing, you know, from a larger shear to a smaller. So it's kind of shearing that chip out to allow it to fly off into no man's land. While a conventional cut, when it's cutting and everything, it's starting at the thinnest part of the cut, and it's shearing to the bigger part of the chunk of that chip and throwing it off. And that can tend to give you a little bit of a not so clean finish, but there are reasons for climb versus conventional. And look it up, Google climb cut versus conventional cut. That's your search term, climb cut versus conventional. And there's some wonderful information just to kind of help you out with those two terms. In this case, I want a climb cut. And if I calculate this, and thank you to whoever asked that question. All right, thank you. Let's preview the selected toolpath. And so we have a pocket cut, simply cutting down 1/4 inch, and we've removed material from within the perimeter of that design. Now, can I use other bits with a pocket cut? Does it have to be just an end mill? Typically, when we're pocketing, we are removing material to create that nice pocket area for one part to fit into another, or a dado, a groove, a rabbet, or some sort. You can use ball nose bits to do a pocket cut. You can use bowl and tray bits, and you can use end mills. I don't really see a purpose where you would ever use a V-bit to do a pocket cut. That would just be too long of a cut and things. But a ball nose bit, I could see that if somebody wanted a straight ball nose. A tapered, you'd have a little bit of an angled wall and things. But typically, it's going to be your end mills, guys and girls, and stuff like that. Now, let's come over here and our profile cut, which we did with the star. I'm just going to open up this profile toolpath here, and I'll use this as an example. Cutting, and let's just cut 1/4 inch deep. And I want to use, with this cut this time, I'd like to use my little round over bit, right? I'm going to use my white side 2050 round over to do this profile cut. And let me get it here. And I want to cut on the outside of the line, but I want to do a round over on the edge. So I'm going to step over. Now we have what's called an allowance. Now I'm getting a little bit advanced here. Allowance means how far do we let that bit go over the line? And in the case of that 1/8 inch round over, I need that bit to step over the line by 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go negative 0.125 because it's rounding over these edges and everything. If I didn't put that allowance in there, my 1/8 inch bit would be rounding over way out here, because it cuts on the right side of the bit. So if we looked at that bit here, it would be cutting on the right side of that bit. And I'm pointing to the left. That's good, Laney. The right side of that cutter. So I need it to step over 1/8 of an inch. So it's actually coming this side of this edge of the cutter is cutting against that line, right? So let's calculate that. And let's preview that visible toolpath. And that should give us that nice round over edge, that 1/8 inch round over cut. And then I could follow up with another profile cut, cutting the part out, and there you go. I got a nice little rounded over block. So a profile cut does not have to be cutting all the way through, and it does not have to be an end mill. So I used a round over fit on that. Now our last example here is a V-carve with a flat depth. V-carve with a flat depth means that I want to pocket this area out. But yet I want whatever's inside of this to be raised up. If there's nothing inside, that means I'm basically only reason why I'm using this toolpath is I want a nice chamfered inside edge. So let's look at it with nothing in the middle to give it that raised effect. We're just going to do a nice simple pocket here. We're going to cut again 1/4 inch deep. I'll use my 60-degree V-bit, and I'll use an 1/8 inch end mill to do the flat work. So if we were to calculate this and we preview that toolpath, now we have a pocket similar to our first cut here, but look at the walls. They have that angle, that 60-degree angle versus our first straight pocket, which is up here, right? So let's get over on the board so everybody can see and things. So now typically when you're doing a V-carve toolpath with a flat depth, it's either because what you're trying to carve is so wide apart. Like if I did not use a flat depth, here's what happens if I don't use a flat depth. If I calculate this, software is going to say, whoa, wait a minute. Your material is only 3/4 of an inch thick. It's going to take 2.514 inches to V-carve this, meaning, you're going to be cutting into your table, cutting all the way through your material. We don't want that. So we have to set the flat depth to limit that cut. Now, if I had this something in the middle of this area here that I wanted to V-carve with a flat depth, and let that text open back up here. And I want to change this word to just the letter A. And I want to make that just a little bit bigger. Let's go 2 inches and that A centered up a little bit. If I were V carving this with a flat depth, the reason why I'm doing this is I want that A to be raised up, right? I want everything to be carved around it and the A to be raised. And how do I know that's going to be what happens? Well, a V carved toolpath typically cuts between the lines, right? Well, I have this boundary around here, meaning it's going to cut between this line and this line. And it's not going to cut between these two lines because it's going to skip. It's going to cut between these two lines, skip between these two, cut between these two lines, skip between these two, and then cut between these two lines. So it's going to cut all the way around. So if I were to calculate this, let's throw a flat depth in there again, 0.25, and calculate that out. Now I'm getting that raised effect where my A is raised up into the bottom of this pocket. So my end mill is doing the rough cut, and then my V-bit's going to come and do all the nice decorative V work, right?
Yep.
So if
Laney, one of the things I want to point out on V cutting that I love about it is not only does it give you a different look, but it also makes your material a little stronger. Your straight wall, especially getting into details where there's like tall chunks of wood sticking out, where you have a V-bit like that A, if you was inverted and that little piece stuck out, you know, if you did that a straight cutter, that piece would break off.
Correct.
Where if you got a nice angle to it, it's kind of like a base. The wider the base is, the top of it's going to stay a little more stable.
Correct. And Burl, I can actually simulate that. You see, guys, what Burl's talking about, we have this nice wide angle here. So it's given that A a lot of meat, right? And also these areas are really small here. So, you know, if I did this as a straight pocket cut, if I did it as the same thing as a straight pocket cut, 1/4 inch deep, this time I'll even use an 1/8 inch end mill. I'll give it the best advantage that I can. I'll use an 1/8 inch end mill. And when I calculate this, you know, if we reset this preview and we come in here and preview the visible toolpath on that pocket cut, I'm getting the straight walls and everything. And let's let it cut out. And if we look at that A, oops, sorry, didn't mean to spin on you guys like that. Let me spin this straight around. If we look at that A, I'm not getting those nice defined sharp corners right, where, you know, that 1/8 inch end mill has just come and kind of pocketed this stuff out. I'm not in some cases now, it's still a pretty good amount of meat here, but in some cases it's real thin and fragile. It could break off, you know, my tips and all.
Right. Those tips and edges there probably wouldn't stay intact.
Right. All these little tips and things. And plus, it's just not a good look.
Right. It's
so
not clean.
Right. And if I come back and look at that again one more time with the V-cut pocket here, we've got that nice clean angle, and that V-bit can get into those tight areas. We have that nice definition in the corners and things, and nice detail and stuff. Okay. You know, so it gives it that extra meat and all. So good point, Burl. Very good point. All right. Last couple quick things, and then we're gonna so I don't see any more questions popping up, but I do want to kind of roll this out real quick. Let's talk about these lines that you see here. Now, a profile cut, like I said, is when you're following a single line. Okay. Some of the things you have to know about your tool paths is some of the tool paths, like the profile cut, like the fluting tool path, the texturing tool path, these 3 tool paths and all can create a tool path on what's called an open vector, meaning that the start point, sorry, I have the hiccups, the start point of my vector and the end point do not come together. So here is a closed vector, my start point and my end point. If I went into node editing, here's my start point. So the start of that line around, they all connect together. Well, this one here, start points here, end points here. So it's considered an open vector. If I tried to use any toolpath that does not, is not allow me to use a, create an open vector, it's going to say, hey, it's going to ignore those unsuitable vectors. You know, it's going to ignore it because it's an open vector. So whenever you have things like, you know, open vectors, and these are really open. I mean, if I wrap this around, let's pull this over close like that, so it just kind of looks closed, right? And let's kind of move this up a little bit. That might look like a closed vector right there, but it's technically open. It's not joined, okay? So you got to be mindful of that. If you ever get the software saying, hey, I'm ignoring this open vector, and you're like, oh wait, one of my letters is missing, got to go back and look and make sure that those start points and end points are together. And how you do that is you got a cool tool over here called the join tool. Click on there and it'll say, hey, you got one open vector selected, but if you click the join button, it'll close it up for you. And now that is a closed vector. Now I could create that, you know, drilling operation, which I'm not going to. I opened the wrong toolpath when I was showing that example, but you know, if it was a pocket cut, same thing. If I tried to pocket cut, and I'm sorry, I hit the drilling toolpath, I'm going to get that ignored vectors. But now that I've closed this vector, it's going to calculate it just fine, right? So if you ever get that open, you know, warning about open vectors, that means you got to go in there and you got to close them up, join them up, okay? And so, but each of these are, these two now are open vectors. Can't say each anymore. Each of these two are open vectors, and this is now a closed vector. Now, drilling toolpath was this guy right here. Burl and I'm kind of a big fan of using a pocket toolpath with an undersized bit when it comes to drilling certain holes. If I want to make sure that that hole doesn't possibly get wobbled out at the top from any kind of deflection of the bit, if I'm plunging too fast, too hard, if I'm plunging too fast, too hard and all, my bit could deflect. And that could actually wobble. Is that a waller right out the top of that hole? Is that a word? You know, my 1/4 inch hole might be, you know, slightly oversized at the top and things, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is here, I'll use a drilling toolpath, right? We'll just do that. So we can do a drilling toolpath, a 1/4 of an inch deep hole, 1/4 inch end mill. A drilling toolpath means you're going to be cutting the hole the same size as the bit you're using. And I'm going to use pecking. I'm going to let it go up or down, cut and pull up and clear out that hole, go down a little further, come up and clear out that hole, go down a little further, come up and clear out that hole. So I'm going to let it peck at that drilling operation for those two holes. And let's preview that. Now, the reason why I created those two holes with a 1/4 inch end mill drilling toolpath is so I could come back and show you this toolpath. Remember, the hole's going to be as big as the drill bit, right? Well, my holes are technically 3/8 of an inch in diameter. So for these circles here, a drilling toolpath is not the right toolpath for this, because unless I was using a 3/8 inch bit, but I'm not. I'm using a 1/4 inch bit, an undersized bit. So, but I got to drill out this 3/8 inch hole. Well, how do I do that? Well, instead of a drilling toolpath, I use a pocket toolpath with my 1/4 inch bit. Let's use my 1/4 inch bit in here. And when I calculate that, that bit is going to come in, and let's go into our 2D view here, and it's going to pocket out up to that, you know, that 3/8 inch in diameter and all. So you got to make sure you're choosing the right toolpath for the job. And that was the whole point of that. But you want to make sure you're choosing the right toolpath. And I'm a big advocate of using an undersized bit when it counts, using an undersized bit and pocketing out a hole versus drilling it, because of that possibility of deflection. And Burl, I think you're kind of the same.
I am. And I've had customers that, you know, hey, how can I get rid of these oval shapes and stuff like that? Especially when you have like a drill bit where it's a 2 flute. And hey, James, your machine is on its way. It's leaving out first thing in the morning. Yes, I had a customer that had problems of getting ovals. And if you go with a smaller bit, and what that's doing is it's removing most of that material, and then your end mill will just go out and just clean that up.
Give that final profile, and it's a nice clean.
Right. Yep. If you're doing the pegs, you know, something that is like a game where your, you know, pegs are got to fit in there tight, that type of things. Those are the type of drilling patterns. Yes, the drill is quicker, or the end mill is quicker doing that one down, but it's not that much time that you're adding to it where it goes down and it goes around. Just a quick little thing,
Yep.
but it also gives you a much better, much cleaner little hole there. Yep.
Yeah. And the last example I wanted to show as far as our examples go here, bro, before I talk about like using bits to make profiles and all, was the beading bit and things. And when you're using a special form tool like our bead bit, let's see here. Let's see if I can get that in the camera. Remember that little bead bit
Yep.
I showed you guys earlier and stuff? Basically that bit has a round over, right? It has a point and things like that. And if we're doing things like fluting, you know, a fluting toolpath or a profile toolpath following the lines, let's say these 4 lines right here, I do a profile toolpath and I want to cut an 1/8 of an inch deep because that's the depth of the bead, the round over, 1/8 inch round over. And I'm going to come in here and choose my beading bit, my 1/8 inch beading bit. So it's got that nice little pointed profile. And I want to be on the line, right? I want that bit to run on the line. And when I calculate this, what that will do for me, and let's see if we can zoom in here. And let me spin this a little bit to the side and kind of bring it down so we can zoom in nice and tight. If we preview that toolpath, it gives us kind of that nice round over bead. And again, my resolution is turned down low, so sorry about the blurriness. I just, for time's sake, but you know, that bit is coming and it's cutting half that round over on this side. When it steps over 1/4 of an inch, the full diameter of the bit, it's going to cut the other half of that round over for that first bead, then the same thing for the second bead and the third bead. Here's the 4 lines that the bit was following. And as a result, I've got 3 beads in here, 3 full beads, and then, of course, 2 half beads on the end. So your profile toolpath is a workhorse. It really is. There's a lot of things that just got to remember the rule of thumb. Anytime you're following a single line, it's a profile toolpath. All right. So hopefully y'all found that information useful and helpful and everything. I'm going to show one last toolpath, and then I want to talk about a little bit about a rotary profile. We'll talk about that in a minute. But keyhole toolpath. So a lot of people like making signs, and they like to be able to hang these signs up on a wall and be able to use a keyhole bit to cut a little keyhole slot in there for hanging the picture or whatever it may be. There are 2 ways to create a keyhole toolpath. Number 1 is if you have Vectric VCarve Pro or Vectric Aspire, you can use the gadgets, and there's a keyhole toolpath gadget. First of all, you've got to select where you want it to start. So let me select this vector and then open the gadget. Software always lets me know when I do something wrong, so that's good. But in that keyhole creator, basically I got to tell it, you know, which way am I going? Am I going from, you know, bottom to top, top to bottom, left to right, right to left? And in my case, I'm going to go from horizontal left to right. And the slot depth, how deep I want it to go. Usually that's typically the little bit beyond the thickness of the cutter of that keyhole toolpath. So I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch deep. I want to go 1 inch long. I want that slot, that keyhole slot, to be 1 inch long. And my entry hole diameter, the diameter of my cutter, is going to be 3/8. And the slot diameter, the diameter of the neck, the cutter on the neck, is 3/16. And if Burl, do you still have your keyhole cutter right there on the? If I could pop you up on the screen here, and the depth of the diameter of his head right there, you know, most likely is about 3/8. It might be, bro. I can't look from there. But the neck, see how that neck has a cutter on it, ladies and gentlemen? That neck has a certain diameter, and that's our slot. That's our slot depth. Thank you, bro. That's our slot diameter there. So in my case, on my particular cutter, it's 3/16. So when I calculate this toolpath, it's going to create that toolpath. And so if we were to look at this, right? If I were to look at this in the 3D preview, and let's reset this back to a blank board, and let's get up here where this, oops, straight on there, boys and girls. You know what a keyhole toolpath looks like, ladies and gentlemen. It's got a big hole in the front, and then it's a slot. Well, if I preview this in this software here, I'm just going to see the slot, right? I'm not going to see the opening hole and everything, because remember, for the tool that I used, I didn't use I couldn't use the actual keyhole toolpath. I had to use my dummy bit, my end mill. So, and again, the software is just reading the feeds and speeds and the pass steps and things like that. But I cannot add a keyhole toolpath to the tool database because of the undercut of the neck and things. So let's that's number one. And in order to create the keyhole toolpath using version number 1, you just have to have a circle drawn where you want the bit to plunge. And as long as you've got that circle selected, you can open the keyhole gadget and, you know, set your parameters. And down here, you can see that it says, it even gives you a reminder, set up a dummy end mill to control speeds and feeds, right? And in my case, I have my keyhole dummy 1/4 inch, right? And so if I click OK, that creates that toolpath. Now, number 2, for you guys and girls that have Vectric VCarve desktop, okay, your VCarve desktop software, you do not have access to the gadget library or the gadgets, so you have to do things a little differently. In the case of you guys and girls, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a rectangle, and first of all, draw a circle where you want it to start. And then you're going to draw a rectangle, and that rectangle is going to be however long you want your slot to be, in my case, 1 inch. And then the height is going to be 1/1000th of an inch, 0.001. Okay. And what you're going to do is, if we zoom in nice and tight here on that left side, that side that's at the center of the circle there, we're going to come in here really tight. We're going to go into node editing mode, and we're going to remove that end line. So what this does is it gives me a start point and an end point. So my bit is in that 1/1000th of an inch step over. You'll never even see that in your cut and everything, but that bit's going to plunge down at the start point. It's going to follow that path all the way out that 1 inch, come over and come back, and it's going to end at the end point, and then it's going to raise up. And so you will create that rectangle, however long you want your slot, your length, and then by 1/1000th of an inch. And you want it to kind of start, you know, the circle we don't use. It's just the rectangle we need. So, but the circle helps me know where I want to
visualization.
Yeah, visualization, because I am going to have the circle, you know, I'm going to have that opening hole for where the screw head goes in and things. So that is the 2 ways to create a keyhole toolpath. And the bottom way, if you have desktop software, that's typically 99.9% of the way you're going to do it. You don't have the option of doing it with the gadget and everything. So, Burl, anything you want to add to that as far as keyhole?
Nope. That's
cool.
Good.
All right, we're going to wrap up with just talking a little bit. This is visual demonstration more so than anything. Remember what I said about the tool companies have been really nice about providing us with their profiles. And let me get out of node editing mode here. You know, their profiles and stuff for their cutters and all. Or if we don't have it, we have to draw the right side of our cutter and things. Well, imagine if I went into, and let's get rid of the left side. Imagine I had that right side of that cutter drawn. And I go into my mirror tool here, and I create a mirror copy, and I just flip it left. Then I've got the full profile of my cutter, right? What advantage can we take of a full profile form tool? Well, a lot of advantages and all when we're doing certain things like beading, or maybe a decorative profile around the edge of our box lid or anything like that. We can actually, instead of using a ball nose bit and creating a molding tool path, we could actually use that form tool to cut along that line, just like I did with the round over cut earlier on that profile cut. Well, what I want to talk about is how we can use our bit profiles to make very cool profile tool paths for the objects like the 4th axis and things. So I've got 3 profiles here. I've got a deep classic 1 inch diameter profile. I've got a classic 2 inch diameter spiral cutter here. And of course, if you're going to use this technique, guys and girls, you got to have the bit, right? Make sure you got the bit. And I'm going to use a plunge point, like that little bead bit, with a 3/8 inch radius instead of an 1/8 inch radius. Now, with a combination of these profile cutters and things, there's my classic spiral. There's my little bead point cutters right there. I got them all side by side, and then I've got my Deep Classic right there. With that, I could simply draw a rectangle on my board, representing kind of the diameter, the length, and the height or diameter of my spindle. And if I select those, I've got a center line here, and I've got a center line here, right? So if I select those guys and girls, and I select the center line, bam, I can flip in my mirror tool about that line, right? And it puts them in the same position that they are, over here. And then let's say I select those, and let's go ahead and select these as well. And I select my center line last this way, and I can flip about that line and boom, flip them down there, right? You can start to see now you can almost kind of see the profile taking shape, right? And to really visualize it, if I take a straight line tool and I connect the cutting points of the cutter, space bar to finish, and this here, that'll give you kind of that three-dimensional illusion, right? So if I connect all these points of my cutters here, you can start to see those beads, like if it was cut all the way around this spindle, you can start to see it take shape. If I come in here and connect that together. And the lines are just for visual purposes. We wouldn't actually use them in our, toolpath. But, now I can start to visualize. And then all I have to do to really visualize is take my trim tool, and I can come in here and trim away the excess, right? And there's my cool little profile for that table leg, right? Now, if I was doing this in a rotary toolpath or a rotary job and everything, this helps me visualize my layout, what my leg is going to look like. But I'm going to be doing a profile toolpath. Remember, when you're following a single line, it's a profile toolpath. And I'm actually going to be using my line tool, not my text tool. Let that open so I can close it again. And from the center of the cutters, right, I would draw a line across the center of the cutters, and that line would span the whole length of my material. And that profile cut on the line with that cutter. Burl, if I'm not making sense, or if I'm losing anybody,
Nope.
let me know. But
yep, I understand exactly. You're doing fine.
The center of my cutter is going to be following that line, cutting all the way across or around my material, should I say, if I was on the 4th axis. But I could do this on a flat board too if I wanted to just create some kind of cool pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to cut all the way around that spindle on that 4th axis, but it's following a single line. And what this does for me, by using the actual cutter, cuts down my machining time dramatically. So for that bit to plunge in and that piece to rotate 360 degrees, the time, even if I was doing it in multiple passes, let's say I did this in 2 passes, that minute or 2 of cutting time versus an hour or 2 or 3 or 6 for doing it as a 3D model is a time saver. So I like the fact that when it comes to tools and cutters, we can use the shape of those tools and cutters and all to create shapes and profiles. And I thought that was pretty cool, Burl, and I wanted to kind of share that little bit of insight. Well, and that would be a pretty cool little beaded table leg, right? And everything.
Nice.
So that's that kind of covers a majority of our tools, where form tools would come into play. This would be a good example where form tools come into play, right? End mills versus V-bits versus ball nose and things. So hopefully you guys and girls enjoyed this. Maybe you got something out of it. Maybe you understand Toolpath a little bit better and what tools you can use with them. Hopefully I've conveyed that okay, Burl. You'll let me know if I didn't. But,
no, you did an excellent job. And this is a session that's a little more educational than it was, selling type of things. But I also think that, when people understand what they're purchasing and the ease of use or what some of the things that they can do with it, it is a selling point when it comes to that. So we get those questions like we would at a typical show. So we thought we would go over them this evening. And you did an excellent job on the profiles. That's something that we really don't get into a lot because we stress so much that the 3 styles of bits does most of what you're cutting. This opens up a whole new profile. You know, like a raised panel, like kind of a fake raised panel, you know, doors where you create that profile and you go around and it gives you those beaded edges and stuff like that. So very nice, very nice.
That's a perfect example. Those faux beadboard raised panels, I've done those before. We're good. Harvey, have you ever had your bit burn the wood when you drill with an 1/8 inch, drill in an 1/8 inch end mill and a hole's an 1/8 of an inch? If you're getting burning, and most likely, you know, that, remember that 1/8 of an inch end mill's got a very small flute, right? Especially if it's a 4 flute end mill, that's even, you know, smaller. Your plunge, you know, for that drilling tool path, it's got to be low. It's got to be slow and low, because that bit is coming down, and it's got to be able to remove that material so that blade can cut. And if it's burning, then you're just, that bit is just, you know, you're just, you know, you're not pecking it away at it and everything like that. So,
and Laney, that brought up a good point, and we didn't talk about it. And this is a poor example of this keyhole bit, but you guys got to realize, like your ball nose bits, your V bits, where those points are, that area right there in that center, there's not a lot of material that's moving. I mean, it's literally going in a very tiny little piece. So it's your, I won't say the poorest cutting area, where these outside edges, you got a long distance. That thing's going around. It's got a nice cutting edge, a lot of surface area. Your end mills in that center point, also your ball nose where it comes to a point, those are your poorest cutting area of that whole bit. And same with a V bit, where you have very little material that's doing any work there. It's doing a lot of work. It just has a lot of very little bit that's able to do that. That cutting. So you got to watch those points. You know, where it's getting down, like that bead bit that you were showing. You don't have a lot of material on that little point up there, and it's doing a lot of cutting. That sucker's clear down inside your wood, and it's cutting away a lot of that area down in there. So no, it's good informational burning. I would suggest on that 1/8 inch, go back to what we talked about earlier. Find that 1/16 inch bit, maybe even a little smaller than an 1/8. Go smaller and clean it out, and it might help.
Yeah, and I'm glad, Sam, I'm glad you found it informative. I hope a lot of you, ladies and gentlemen, do. And we're going to wrap up here, and Burl's going to wrap up with an announcement. And then we'll say our goodbyes and stuff. But Burl, what you got in your hands there?
Well, what I wanted to do, and this is kind of a key, and I'm not telling Laney he's going too long, even though we went 2 hours, which is probably one of our longer shows, but that's okay. This was informational. It's good stuff. Whether you're, you know, somebody looking at buying, or somebody that has one of our machines, and you know, hopefully some of the knowledge that, you know, we've been doing. Guess what? My wife told me our anniversary is literally within a few days of 10 years of the official day that we started. So anyhow, hopefully some of the information that Laney does all the time, and you know, what little that I can throw into the mix, hopefully helps people, whether you're looking to buy or a customer out there. What I'm pointing up here is one of our sets, and you know, we try to do during these shows, try to do a little bit of promotional. The last few we weren't as drastic as some of the earlier ones. We were you know, doing some pretty deep discounts, but what we thought, since we was talking about bits, this is our sign making bit. We haven't advertised it a lot. It come on probably less than a year ago. We started selling this. So what we thought we would do is, number one, talk about our bits, our bit sets. This is kind of for the sign cutting bit set. This sells for $200. What we would do is I've got 5 units. The first 5 to get a hold of Laney either today or tomorrow, or this evening or tomorrow, we'll let this go for $175. That's basically 25% off of this set. This is the only set we're doing it, so it's not our other sets, but this is the 5-piece Cnc Sign-Making Set. Has that really sharp bit over here. Sorry, I'll
call them off again. So Burl, he can point from left to right or right to left, but it's got a 30-degree V bit. Oh, well, let's go. All right. There you go. 30-degree V bit. It's got a 60-degree replaceable insert V bit. It's got a 16th inch tapered ball nose. a 1/4 inch down cut spiral, and an 1/8 inch upcut spiral. And the all except for the 60-degree V bit are Spectra coated bits that help. It's like a ceramic coating that helps extend the life of the bits, keeping the bits cooler during runs and things. But also, there's a variety of materials that can be, cut with those Spectra bits and also.
And the informational guide comes with that set. So that's our kind of our special today on that. No, it went a little bit longer, but I think it was a very useful informational session here that people can get a little bit of better idea of the different bits and stuff like that. So
yeah, we have 5 of them in stock. So if any of you are interested in that bit set and all, we only have 5 available. You can call, you can place the order with me, or you can, I would prefer you call, and the phone number is right there on the screen, right below Burl, actually, 833 DWC CNC1. That is 392-2621.
Yes.
All right.
As far as I'm,
yeah,
it's been exciting around Digital Woodcarver. A lot of things going on. We're not slowing down. Getting our building, working on that. It's a work in progress. So as we progress along, we'll get some pictures of it. It's in a pretty rough state right now, so pictures don't do us justice, but it will be before long. Excited about that going on, but it is busy here. Sales have been doing very well for people. If you'd like to know that, Laney's doing a good job.
We have a sale coming in tomorrow, bro. Somebody that saw us from one of our shows, our virtual shows here, called right before the show today, and he's going to call tomorrow to place his order. So
very nice.
4-axis package.
Very nice. On the guys there. Anyhow, I'm basically going to cut out, see if we can cut this under 2 hours. Are almost done. But guys, it's been real. Keep safe out there, and happy carving, and keep those machines running.
Absolutely. And Burl, thank you again for this, very informative and stuff, and also for the special on the bits. We appreciate that always. For everybody, I want to thank you for joining us and sticking with us through this, and hopefully be sure to join us, not this coming Wednesday, but next Wednesday. We're doing these live shows every other Wednesday. So that is June 10th, where we are going to be covering finishing projects. We're going to talk about different types of finishes. We're going to talk about different types of finishes and techniques and things like that. So that's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about coatings for glass and laser engraving and stuff.
Yeah, we got to get some of that, Laney.
I was going to ask you if you wanted me to send. Let me know. I'll have it sent to you. Okay. But we're going to talk about Aura Mask, all kinds of things. So join us June 10th, Wednesday after next, for that live event. So, all right. And unless Burl has something else to add, we're going to say good night. Thank you, everybody. And until next time, we'll see you soon.